Hi, it's Lucy here and thanks for coming to check out my video. Today I'm going to be showing a few tips and tricks on how to give your cards a more professional finish. I'll be showing lots of cards using this same design and the differences between the card on the right that has a lot of errors and the more professional finish on the left. So my first tip is the card bases and the quality. It really should be 250 GSM to 350 GSM. This one is a 200 GSM and it's just too flimsy. You'll find that it'll bow when standing up for long periods of time. So for all my normal size cards, I use 300 GSM, and if they're larger cards, I'll use 350 GSM. This just gives a really sturdy base so that they stand up nicely and don't fall over. And now on to the papers, the designer papers. This one is a very flimsy one. It's about 120 GSM. This one is from Kaisercraft and it's 160 GSM. And then I have beautiful papers from Uniquely Creative, which are 210 GSM, which it gives a little bit of bend, so it's perfect for covering cards. You really want to use the nicer quality, the thicker cards. So I feel like it's important if you're going to buy a paper pad anywhere that you just have a little feel of the paper, because it might have the prettiest designs ever, but if it's the really flimsy paper, it's never going to give that professional look. So back to this card that I made just to show all the errors on it. I've used just a cheap craft glue to stick down the paper. And on the other card, I've used my Sally's Aquadare, which is really good. I pop it in this little bottle here and top that up all the time. I also use a good tape, a fairly thick one, as you can see. And I also use a thin foam tape, which I buy from Bunnings in quite a large roll. It's a really good height. It's not too thick like some of the other ones. So with this card that I made many errors on, I haven't glued down the edges properly, so that's a big giveaway to it just being very homemade. Whereas with this card, I've made sure that all the edges are down by using the foam tape and just a very slight amount of glue to make sure that it stays. Another tip is to choose the really nice papers from the paper pad. These are all from the same paper pad, a Kaisercraft one. And I used a grey and purple striped, which isn't a great colour combination in that design, so it doesn't give a lot of interest on the background. Also, the sentiments, sometimes they're made mainly for scrapbooking, so make sure to choose the ones that suit a card rather than just a pretty sentiment that doesn't really make sense to giving it to someone. And centering is quite important if you're trying to keep it symmetrical. So with the embellishments, the butterfly here is way too large. It'd be perfect if it was going to be the focal point, but as an embellishment, it's too big for the card. And it's also, I've glued down the butterfly wings flat, whereas I will usually use anything with a tube-like shape, so a pen here, or a lollipop stick, a clean one obviously. Anything that helps with the size, depending on the size of the wings, just to give them a little bit of a bend, and then just glue down the body of the butterfly and let the wings be free. You can sometimes put a little bit of tape down there. Also, when you're fussy cutting, some of these I've cut on the line and some I've cut about 1 mil or 2 outside of the line. It's best to choose one or the other. and just try to take a little bit more time with it when fussy cutting. You may also notice on the flimsy card that the rhinestones have just been placed wherever, and there's an even amount, which we're not supposed to do. Occasionally this will work though, but the rule of thumb is that odds look more appealing. So let's start a card. This one is a 300 GSM card base, and I'm using Uniquely Creative's Tranquility collection, and I've chosen two contrasting papers. I really hate to use the other side of that beautiful paper, but sometimes we have to sacrifice when they're double-sided papers. I've also got a black glitter card there as well, which I'll be using to mount. And I have some tips to level up the papers instead of having them flat on the card like the first example. So you can either die cut the papers like I am here, and these are using stitch dies which give even further interest and a great finish to the papers. You can also ink the edges or distress the edges with scissors or a distressing tool, and I'll show an example of this on a card later on where I show a few more examples. You can also mount the papers onto cardstock or shiny metallic card or glitter card like I have, and especially if you do have the flimsy papers that you love, but yeah, they don't have that same quality to them, mounting them is definitely the way to go. And you can also add foam tape to give added interest, giving further contrast to the papers, separating them that way. So I'm just using my guillotine to cut a very small border. It just really intensifies the difference in the papers when you use a contrasting color like this black, but any color. I could have used purple as well, would have looked really nice. White can sometimes look really fresh as well. So now I'm going to use my double-sided tape to tape down the paper onto the glitter card. And what happens is sometimes glitter paper, if you've used it before, you'll notice that it's quite hard to make sure that the paper stays down onto it. And so I use a little bit of the glue as well as the double-sided tape, and this just ensures that it's going to stay because it's a permanent glue, and once that's down and dried flat, it'll be fine. I know that it will stay in place. So I'll do the same with this piece as well, and I don't like to use too much, as I said before. Even on these thicker, beautiful papers, you can still get bowing if you use too much of glue in one spot, so try not to get big dobs of glue. So now I'm going to tape down the back side of the glitter paper, and this is just normal black card on that side, so you don't need the glue as much, but I'm still going to just make sure that this stays down completely. So just popping it down very carefully into the center, and then I'll be doing the same with this part as well, but I'll be using the thin foam tape instead. You can see how thin that is, so it just lets this pop off the page a little bit more, but without being too high, so it's easy to pop in the post. The other thing is that sometimes I know we like to keep as much foam tape as we can because it's quite expensive, so we don't like to use it this much, but it is still better to make it more even. If you're going to make a special card, yeah, it's very important to make it as even as possible by putting down quite a bit of the foam tape. And so now I'm just going to find a sentiment. This one I found on eBay. That butterfly seems to be a little bit too large for me. And so I will find another embellishment to put on there instead. So I'm just going to die cut this sentiment, but that's with the black glitter paper. And the black glitter paper isn't that thick. So what I'll be doing is die cutting it another couple of times with black cardstock and then layering them up so that it's 3 layers high, and this gives a really nice look to any die cut items. Yeah, and I've just used the glue to glue them together. Using this metal tipped glue bottle, which you can find on Amazon, my sister found recently, really helps to put down glue in these tiny little areas, because you don't want to have like big dobs of glue in places. Although this dries clear, you'll still be able to see it if there was like a big clump of it, if you looked closely. So I try to be as thin as possible with the glue, and I will turn that over and like tap off any excess onto my scrap paper there if I feel like I've used too much in one area, or if it's come out too fast out of the bottle. So I'm just going to do the next layer, and then I'll put the black glitter die cut on the top, and that will go really beautifully on the card because it's matching the mounting backgrounds as well. So that's another good idea for making sure that everything's cohesive and all the colours match well. So I'm popping that on, and then in the meantime I'm going to have a look, and on this paper here it has a beautiful little bird, so I'm going to really carefully fussy cut this. I do have fussy cutting scissors, and I do recommend if you're new to fussy cutting that you do use the smaller scissors that are much easier to use. But because I've been a little lazy over the years and I use these scissors all the time, these are a Fiskars scissors, I do tend to find that I've got quite good at using these, and yeah, it saves me looking through my stash of items to find the others. I'm just going to take off any extra ink off this little dauber here, and I'm going to go around the outside of the bird. This just stops it looking like a paper embellishment. Because these papers are quite thick, it looks much better than just a normal flimsier paper, but it's still really nice to take away those white sides by inking it just lightly around the outside. And then I'm cutting up my foam dots as well, so that every little bit of it is sticking down nicely and won't be pulled up. I'm going to be playing around with some rhinestones. I do like to put pearls or rhinestones on quite often. They just give a little extra pizzazz to the card. But in this instance, I couldn't really find the perfect place for them, because on the left-hand side, I already have the bird, and so they didn't really go down on the left-hand side very well. They looked quite nice in the flower paper, so just in the flower centres, and I've also glued them on. Now, although they're self-adhesive, most of these always are, I think it's a really good idea to glue them down, because you don't want little babies or little children to start pulling them off and thinking they're lollies and eating them, or just putting them in their mouths. So if they're glued down, they won't be able to take them off as easy as what they can if they're just the self-adhesive that they come with. So I ended up leaving the rhinestones off the bottom of this, and I still felt like it needed something else down the bottom. So just playing around, and with Uniquely Creative's kits, they also have creative cuts, and some of them are vellum as well, and often they're adhesive now too, but this particular collection isn't. So I've just popped a little bit of my glue down, which dries clear so you can't see, and so I've just popped down a bit of that, smushed it with my finger, and then popped the flower down on the bottom of the card. And that's the finished card here. And so out of all of them, you can definitely tell the difference between the one that I made that had lots of errors and these three beautiful cards. You can really feel the difference as well. These ones are all, they just feel quality, they feel thicker, they feel very sturdy, and they all have a little bit of shimmer or shine, and they just, yeah, they've turned out really well. So they're all the same design, and I've got a couple of others to show as well. So if you've got to the end of this video, I also have some tips for you as well. So using beautiful papers, very quick, thick quality ones, also helps with things like this. I put on a butterfly and I added too much 3D paste, and it just didn't look right, and I tried scratching some of it off and it didn't work, but I pulled that off with my knife fairly carefully, and it didn't rip anything else other than the little bit where I'd put glue. Whereas if you use cheap papers, sometimes it'll run when you tear it all the way up your card. So now no one will know the difference that I've changed the butterfly over, but I then noticed that when I was trying to scratch some of the bits off the other butterfly on that card, I ruined the sentiment. I actually scratched the sentiment somehow. So I will have to change that over. So I don't know if you can see here. So now all I'm going to do is go over the sentiment with another sentiment, and I found this one pretty quickly and it works just as well. So I'm just going to glue, use my glue. It's quite thick already, so it doesn't really need any foam tape or anything on this card because the butterfly wing is going to be just touching it, so I wanted it to be flatter on the card. And now no one will know that this actually had a different butterfly and a different sentiment on there. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you've got to the end of it, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you'll subscribe if you haven't already. I love reading any comments as well. And I'm about to show a couple of other examples, and they are also using Uniquely Creative papers, and so I'll have a link to their store below. Thanks for watching. Bye.